So in this lesson we're going to be looking at React props. So props is a special keyword in React that stands for properties, and props are used for passing data in React from a parent component to a child component. So it's important to note that that passing of data is only one way. We can pass data back from a child to a parent using what's called a callback. We will not be covering callbacks in this lesson, but in a future lesson. For now, we're just going to focus on props. So as mentioned, props is for passing data from one component to another. And in this lesson, specifically what we're going to do is create a new component called cycle list, which is we're going to use to render our dimensions on our UI, and we're going to pass our Hypercube data from our app component to our cycle list component. Now we did cover props very briefly in the first section, so hopefully this will be nice and easy for you guys. So first thing I'm going to do is just reorganize this project a little bit. I'm going to create a new folder in SRC called components. I'm going to move our hypercube.jsx into components, and then we know we need to kind of change our roots here. So now importing from components hypercube. I'm going to create a new file called cyclelist.jsx. And then we can write out our syntax for a typical React component. So import React from React. We can create a function, so I'm going to create const of cycle list. And then we're going to want to return something. Maybe a blank div for now. And we can export default cycle list. And we can just type in here the title, so cycle through dimension values. I'm going to also include a parent div, because underneath this we're going to want our data from our Hypercube. Okay, so we've got our Hypercube data in HC here in our app component, but how about passing it now to our cycle list component? Well, the first thing we need in this app.js is our cycle list. So let's import that. So import cycle list from components cycle list. And instead of this console log, you can just use that component here. So cycle list and just a self-closing tag. And then now in our UI, where we've got that title, cycle through dimension values. Now, as mentioned, we pass data using props. So let's add a property to our cycle list component. And we can just call this property data. And we want to pass into this property HC. So we're passing our Hypercube data in a property which we've called data. We could call this anything. But we just know now we can grab that property in props.data. In cycle list, we need to grab those props. So we're passing the props into this function. And I'm just going to console log those props for now. And we can look at our console. Okay, we can ignore these errors for now. I think that's why we were typing. So you can see now cycle list has an object called data, and that now contains our Hypercube. So in this data property object, we're now passing our Hypercube. So that looks good. So now in order to grab that, we need to kind of destructure this object. And in order just to have the Hypercube data, we need to to use the syntax props dot data. So we're accessing our properties object, and then we're accessing the data property within that object. And now you can see the second console is just our Hypercube object, which is exactly what we need. We don't need to name that object data. So I'm just going to add the console log in our JSX. Move this here. Just clear that, and here we go. So now we have our Hypercube, which is being returned to the console in our cycle list components. So in fact, we've used props to pass data from our app component to our cycle list component. Awesome. So that's all for this lesson. So nice and easy. Hopefully you understand now how to use props in passing data from a parent to a child. As I said, we will move on to callbacks in a future lesson. You know, there will be a lot of instances where we might want to pass some data back from our child component, which is cycle list, up to app.js. Just before I close the lesson, I do want to show you just a visual representation of what we've done. So I can just add a capital here. So we know that index.js is the root of our project, which is here. This is where we're rendering our React project to our root element in our HTML. So that's the project root. A child of index.js is app.js. So app.js is being imported into index.js and is in fact a child component, which is going to be the base of our project typically. So app.js is the base of our component. Index.js is what handles our rendering. And app.js in fact has two children. So the Hypercube data component and cycle list. And here I've just depicted one, but it will have a second called Hypercube. And cycle list is a child of apps.js. And exactly what we've done in this lesson is that we've passed data through properties from app.js to cycle list. Okay, so that's just a bit of a visual representation, just maybe to help you frame that React project in your mind. And that's all for this lesson.